Let's not deny it. Big sword, good. Big sword, very good. Everybody loves a proper hefty blade, and if you don't, give it a whirl. You are not immune to the Buster Sword fantasy.
Me? Gungaga.
A fantasy that Dragon's Dogma most certainly allows you to live out as a warrior. Warrior can potentially seem underwhelming to some for a number of reasons. However, this class is not to be underestimated. Warrior chads know they can fuck it up, and I'm gonna show you how. While it struggles in some scenarios, Warrior is built with a specific focus in mind, and it does it exceedingly well. A skilled warrior will be able to break through whatever comes their way. Warriors exist for a single purpose: to utterly flatten a motherfucker. If an enemy's within range, it's only a matter of time before the walking nuke that is the warrior will make it stop existing. And for those who are out of range, don't worry. While warriors can't make use of projectiles, that's okay, because they will find a way to instead become the projectile. Quick note, to this end I'd personally recommend making use of a pawn with the launchboard skill that I covered in my fighter guide. Being able to skip climbing to reach weak points with your aerial heavy attack is a big deal, as is the ability to reach flying enemies. On top of this, warriors are extremely good at standing up. Yes, I'm serious. Warriors wobble, but they don't fall down. They have a high resistance to stagger and knockdown effects, and are practically unstoppable once they start attacking. The moment their attack animation begins, they gain a certain immunity akin to the stability augment. Blasts of wind, stomping, and shockwaves can all be ignored, so keep swinging for the fences. Okay, now for real, to address a bit of a weakness here, let's take a look at what happens when a warrior grapples an enemy and tries to attack. I'll stop you, evildoer! Bro, what? So yeah, this isn't the most devastating grapple attack because it's slow, takes a big hit to damage due to being incapable of utilizing elements, and it doesn't even look cool, which is, as we're all aware, the most important part. In most cases, you're actually better off going for aerial attacks if you can, or far-reaching swings to catch weak points. The other big weakness they have is a lack of versatility. Warriors can only make use of 3 skills at a time, as opposed to the typical 6 other classes have access to. And while their inability to engage at long ranges can be compensated for easily enough with a party, without them the warrior is shit out of luck if they can't reach an enemy, and their only means of dealing magical damage is via an enchanted weapon. That said, the solutions are there and readily available. Just keep in mind that by playing a warrior, you are very much doubling down on chunky physical damage delivered via slow, devastating swings. Quick note about aerial heavy attack before we continue. This move hits hard and has strong knockdown, and while the reach is decent, it's limited by the fact that instead of functioning like fighter's aerial heavy, the attack itself only becomes active once you hit the ground. If you want to actually deal damage in the air itself, you'll have to rely on your aerial light attack instead. Since their only skills apply purely to their greatsword, let's take a look at what they can do. Indomitable Lash has you start charging up a powerful strike that can smash through an enemy's guard and even ignores Cyclops armor. While charging, this move grants you armor. Now you might be thinking, well, yeah dumbass, I'm already wearing armor. And to that I say, you're going to need it when I find you. What this means is you can withstand enemy attacks as most of them won't be able to stagger you, but you will still take damage from them. Also, during a charge, you'll notice a bright flash happen just as the charge completes. If you release the charge as soon as possible after this flash, the attack will come out faster, stronger, and have a shorter recovery afterward. This is how you make proper use of the skill, and doing so results in a shockwave that staggers and knocks down enemies around you. This is something you can use at the end of a string of light attacks as a swift but decently powerful combo ender. Pommel Bash has almost no range, very little actual damage, and can't deal elemental damage, but it's a very fast attack that is almost guaranteed to stagger a small to medium enemy or break through their guard. This grants it a good deal of utility, don't write this one off. Those of you who play fighting games might recognize this skill as a hit confirm, which means it's a safe way to start a combo. With your enemy staggered, you have the freedom to commit to even slower attacks and skills without needing to worry about the natural vulnerability that comes with a long windup. It can also be used defensively to interrupt an enemy's attack, and because it's so fast, it can feasibly be used on multiple enemies. Technically speaking, Corona Slash is better for groups, but we'll get to that soon enough. Pommel Bash can even be used to cancel the vulnerable recovery flames. Pommel Bash can even be used to cancel the vulnerable recovery frames on slower attacks. So keep that in mind. Whirlwind Slash is a misleading name because this skill does not generate a whirlwind. Missed opportunity, but it's all good. It has the warrior stab forward, then swing upward and slam their blade down behind them, technically making it deal 3 hits, though you might be hard pressed to land all 3 on an enemy that isn't a chunky chungus. The second hit is especially good for launching smaller enemies into the air, and the skill has great knockdown overall. This one's pretty straightforward, but it's perfectly effective at what it does. Using it on larger enemies can be pretty effective, especially to reach weak points. Exodus Slash is a fast backstepping slash to be used as an evasive tool that can be followed up with a pommel strike and an overhead slash to get you right back into the fight. This is one of Warrior's few defensive moves, and an incredibly valuable one at that, because the first evasive swing makes you invulnerable for the duration. Though it may take experience to use well, clever use of this skill can let you utterly negate various attacks and stay close to enemies while keeping up the pressure. A large window of iframes such as this is almost too good to pass on. Keep this one in mind. Catapult Blade is the warrior's equivalent of Fighter's launchboard skill, letting the user fling an ally into the air to reach airborne... Did I just say airborne? Letting the user fling an ally into the air to reach airborne enemies or weak points. However, I'd recommend slapping this or launchboard on a pawn to synergize with the warrior arisen, since it allows you to close gaps that are vital to have an answer to given warrior's complete lack of range. Also happens that this skill can launch up to 3 allies at once, so like, that's a thing. Indomitable Lunge is a running charge that deals several small hits before delivering a strong uppercut similar in power to Fighter's Burst Strike. I will get into all of the details here, but alternatively, to give you a general idea of how this works, I could also just say, you ever play Soul Calibur? Because the full stretch of this move is armored, you can sort of treat this move like a parry, assuming the incoming damage isn't too severe as it doesn't grant invincibility frames. You can cancel this move by hitting the jump button, but rather than instantly jumping, you instead round off the move by skipping straight to the final uppercut. This is useful because if you immediately cancel the skill after starting it up, it costs no stamina, so you can actually use it as a quick and easy knockdown attack. Just keep in mind the actual attack power is pretty low. This is one you pick up for utility. Corona Slash does a big wombo sweep. That's it. That's all it is. Go home. This thing sucks. Does very little damage, and it's got a good few recovery frames, so you got plenty of time to think about your mistakes if you fuck up. Oh sure, it sweeps up goblins and other small enemies every time, but it does jack diddly fuck the big fellas, and besides, why would you ever have trouble with goblins unless you were doing a fists only run on hard mode with no pawns on a fresh playthrough? Only a fucking idiot would do that. Get this skill out of here, I'm done looking at it.
This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would.
Active Vengence is insanely metal. The warrior starts charging an attack, remaining static while they do so. Charging makes you resistant to stagger and knockdown effects, and even others such as sleep. The charge of this attack is raised by damage taken in this state, and the power level of that charge is indicated by a glow, the strongest being a bright red. Releasing the attack at this point results in one word: pin, baby! That was 2 words! You deliver a massive sweeping slash that obliterates smaller enemies and deals heavy damage to larger ones. This can be used to turn an enemy's attack against them, but it's not as generally effective as something like a standard parry, given you need to take damage to deal it back. However, you can actually use curatives while charging, so if you got some green warriors and like to live dangerously, I'm just saying. This is actually worth keeping in mind because of how the attack itself works. Not only does it entirely ignore all defenses, it delivers a whopping 4 times the damage taken while charging. Because you can just keep healing while you charge, you can feasibly tank as much damage as you like, so long as you packed enough curatives to unleash an absolutely massive attack, feasibly capable of one-shotting powerful enemies outright. It's not super viable given the large strain this puts on your resources, but it is a lot of fun. Keep in mind, you're still vulnerable to specific strong attacks and grabs during the charge, so stay on your toes. Warcry is Warrior's equivalent of Fighter's shield summons and is just as straightforward. Acts as a give and taunt, drawing enemies towards you specifically to allow you to play the role of tank. Not much else to say about this one. Finally, Arc of Deliverance is effectively a slower version of Indomitable Lash that requires more stamina but deals an absolutely enormous amount of damage. Charging greatly increases stagger and knockdown resistance, allowing you to shuffle about the battlefield freely.
Unless you get grabbed like an absolute numpty.
Grabs aside, you can take a lot of punishment here, and you can even jump cancel if need be, so bear that in mind. The strike sends out a shockwave that can stagger enemies, and those in the immediate vicinity of the attack still take damage even if they aren't hit directly. The attack and shockwave can both launch small to medium enemies so high into the air that they actually take fall damage. This is another ability capable of one-shotting large enemies, but it typically requires the use of periapts and such to do so. Even when it doesn't one-shot, chances are this will still do a massive chunk of damage regardless when used right. Despite the very long wind-up to charge the skill, it's definitely worth keeping around to really capitalize on staggered or knocked down enemies. As far as augments go, look out for Audacity, which is good for increasing knockdown and stagger resistance while charging attacks. And similarly, Temerity halves damage taken while charging. Impact increases your knockdown stat, Clout boosts your strength by a solid 20%, and Proficiency reduces the stamina cost of melee abilities by 25%. Warrior is something of an understated vocation. It gets a lot of flack and can be seen as much less capable than other vocations due to its particular weaknesses. But I do think people focus too much on the drawbacks of the slower abilities rather than looking at what complements their core skills well. Similarly to Fighter, you can get a lot out of Warrior's light, heavy, and jumping attacks. Once you throw stuff like Pommel Bash and Exodus Slash into the mix, you have a surprising amount of control over the battlefield. And your natural tankiness combined with Exodus Slash makes you extremely difficult to kill. While other melee vocations have the ability to outpace it in regards to damage, that's less to do with Warrior being specifically bad, and more that every vocation in this game is good in my opinion. This one is most definitely viable, especially when complemented by a party. But most of all, Warrior is flat out fun as hell. It might be tricky to get to grips with and use correctly, but it's also incredibly rewarding, especially for sheer enjoyment factor. If you're considering taking up the Greatsword, go for it, and don't let anything hold you back. That about wraps it up for this video, but next up is Ranger. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe, drop a like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. You can join my Discord for updates and to hang out with the lovely members of the Thieves Guild. I can also be followed on Twitter, and if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so on Patreon, or simply donate directly via PayPal. Links can be found in the description below. Have a great day. I'll catch you next time.